Hey everyone, we're back for another episode of Ask GN following a week of crazy RX 480 mods and benchmarks, of course after the 1080 mods and benchmarks. And as always, you can leave questions in the comments below and we'll try to address them in the next episode. Before getting to this episode's content, it is brought to you by Origin PC and their new Chronos PC, which is equipped with either the GTX 1080 or RX 480 available on their store. So getting to the questions, the first one I wanted to look at is pertinent to the last few days of discussion on overclocking with the RX 480. And it's a general question asked by many of you, basically stating, why does undervolting help with the RX 480? So this is something we've seen on Reddit threads and a couple other places on the internet. Basically, some folks have found that if they undervolt or lower the voltage on their RX 480, they're getting a more stable clock rate, and that improves frame rates. So the way this works at a top level, first of all, the RX 480 Polaris and GTX 1080 Pascal architectures are both pretty complex with their boost functions, boost 3.0 for NVIDIA and just normal boosting for AMD. And part of that complexity is an attempt at power savings during idle states or low load states. Part of it is throttling the clock rate as the power increases either undesirable levels or unsustainable levels. And those things factor in to, if you were to plot it against time, you'll see that the frequency sometimes goes a little bit like that. And what you want is a line that's as flat as possible when you're playing games. And we show this in our reviews for both of these cards. So because of the frequency modulation, and because AMD and NVIDIA are both kind of looking at, okay, this is what our frame rate target is, if you've defined one, the undervolting will help by two main modes, and one is reducing the power consumption. As you increase your voltage, you also increase the power diversion in watts to that function of the GPU. So you're giving more power to the voltage, which helps stabilize the clock rate if you're overclocking, but it also takes power away from other components like the core and the memory. And so undervolting means that you're freeing up some of that extra wattage for use elsewhere in the system, or the video card in this instance. But it also means that you may threaten the stability of your clock because you can't push the frequency as high, potentially. But in the case of the RX 480, kind of a special card, because of its power draw, because of the issues that have been discussed the last few days, and we'll have videos on this with the PCIe bus and things like that. Undervolting will primarily benefit by not threatening stability if you're sticking too close to stock clocks, and it will also allow extra power to be given to the cores. So what happens is, if you look at our How to Overclock guide for the RX 480, you'll see that when I first push the clock rate to 1300 megahertz, which is maybe a 30 to 40 megahertz offset, we don't actually hit that 1300 megahertz number. So the overclock is almost a phantom overclock. It's not actually doing anything, and it doesn't do anything until I increase the power percent given to the card. So increase that to 50%. That frees up more power for the GPU by way of allowing it to draw more, and that allows the higher clock rate. So by undervolting, you can sort of do the same thing without even having to increase that power percent, or at least without having to increase it as far as we did, and you're able to preserve sort of a lower power state on the card while maintaining more stable stock or slight overclock clock rates. So hopefully that answers the basics of it. It's a very complex question with these new boost clocks on these two architectures, but that's the top level. That pretty much explains how it works in a way that, that is relevant to overclocking. Next question is from Leo DS, who's a regular on the channel. Leo says, we are seeing tons of custom Pascal cards with added power inputs and decreased power delivery. Is there any point to that at all? Or is that just something that manufacturers are doing to be able to check boxes on feature lists, but ultimately give you no advantage? Of course, historically better check. Let's see. Basically asking, will you get a better overclock if there's more VRM phases, more power, or should you just buy the cheapest Pascal card with a decent cooler? So this is a good question. The main thing to look at here, we've posted this in our GTX 1080 review of the MSI card and of the reference card and of our own hybrid model, which we built here. And basically, we were seeing very little additional overclocking, if any at all, from these more advanced VRM phasing power delivery solutions like the MSI one, which even has an extra power header. So you might get a little bit extra room. I think we were getting like 20 or 30 megahertz extra off of MSI's card. We got, I think, about 100 extra megahertz off of this, but of course silicon's different, but the cooling solution did matter quite a bit. Ultimately though, you're looking at a couple frames per second if you are overclocking 4 frames per second, so no, it wouldn't be worth really dumping a ton of money into a high-end 1080 if you were just after FPS. If you're trying to get as much overclock as you can, it's really not an enthusiast overclocking architecture. You can get pretty far with Pascal overclocking, sort of in the 2100 megahertz range, but that's still, it doesn't feel like a lot when you're actually doing it because it's maybe 1 or 2 steps and you're kind of done and there's no more stability left in the card to be had. So kind of answering the question, I wouldn't go buy the cheapest card, certainly, especially if it's something with a cheap plastic blower fan that's kind of like the reference design but with a worse fan. That's going to be noisy and have a bad cooler. So always prioritize thermals when you're trying to spend less but don't really care about overclocking. Still prioritize thermals. So look at the multi sort of push fan coolers. In terms of extra power phases, I'm not seeing a lot of difference right now, and that is mostly because of VBIOS and whatever limitations Pascal and its unique architecture has. This is still a new process node, so we're still learning about it. So yeah, I wouldn't go and spend a bunch of money on some insane overclocking card right now. For example, if a 1080 Lightning were to come out today, I don't think I would necessarily recommend buying it unless they do some kind of custom VBIOS that does not have the NVIDIA imposed BIOS limitations, or voltage limitations, I should say, because those are what's ultimately going to hold you back. And I don't know if those VBIOS limitations are for any other reason than maybe just this new FinFET process doesn't survive well at these higher frequencies and voltages for long-term use. Or it could just be trying to keep things under control if there's a higher-end card coming out sooner. Any number of reasons, but no, I just wait and see what happens. If there's like a VBIOS hack someone posts on a forum, maybe it'll be worth it then. Next question. cryohellinc says, regarding the hybrid GPUs, EVGA GTX 1080 hybrid and MSI 1080 Seahawk and Gigabyte's 1080 Xtreme WaterForce, which one to pick cooling wise in the future? Saw your DIY video for the 1080 hybrid and the results were impressive. Will you test those cards? So we've tested the Seahawk from the last generation, and I'll be testing hopefully the new one. It's the same as Corsair's Hydro Graphics. MSI provides the board, Corsair provides the cooler. EVGA's got their hybrid model, and then Gigabyte's got the WaterForce, as mentioned. The WaterForce is a little bit different. The WaterForce cools more than just the GPU. If you look at it, it's got some extra copper in there, and it's piping some of the water through other components, which helps keep those other components cooler, but also means that your liquid temperature will be higher. And I would suspect, and I have not tested this, I would suspect that the GPU core temperature would be slightly higher than something like the EVGA hybrid, but you're cooling things like the VRM more efficiently. So there's a trade-off there. It's the same thing we saw with the Fury X, where you're piping water through more components. Liquid temperature is higher as a result, but overall card temperature is lower. So that's the different one here. The Seahawk and the EVGA hybrid function the same way. They basically use a CLC mount just like this. CLC mounted to a card and a bracket, and then a blower fan for the VRM. So those work the same way, and the VRAM, I should say. The EVGA model, historically, we've seen performs better. That's for a few reasons. One, the cold plate on the liquid cooler has an extrusion or protrusion, and that adds basically extra copper to sink the heat before wicking it away and dissipating it. And the fan design is different. Of course, that's important. And MSI's Seahawk uses an H55 CLC. That's a CPU cooler. It's got the same cold plate on it that is used for the H55, and those are targeted more towards cooling CPUs. So there's different hotspots on CPUs than on GPU silicon. So you see some differences there. Now, the Seahawk in the past generation was overclocked higher, so there were slightly higher FPS results. So it really became a trade-off what you wanted there. Both of those cards were fine when I tested them. The hybrid was more thermally impressive, but the Seahawk is certainly fine too. It comes down to price really. If there's a $50 difference, then I'd probably lean towards the cheaper one for the most part, or the one that looks the best if that's your thing. The 1080 WaterForce, we will see. I'm not sure what to think of that yet. Next question is CY2087. I'm doing my first system build, wanted to wait for the release of the 10 series of GPUs. Now that they're here, I noticed the sweet spot for gaming seems to have shifted from 1080p to 1440p. That seems somewhat accurate. That's the direction I'm planning to go, but given the money the monitors required have also gone up in price recently, do you plan to do reviews, monitors? So I think I will kind of address this at a general level. One thing to note is don't skimp on your monitor purchase, especially now, because the ability of GPUs is increasing to push those high resolutions. And people, especially me in the past, people tend to buy their monitor and stick with it for a number of years. I would imagine most of you do the same, unless you're you really like getting a new monitor regularly. So I would spend extra money on a monitor certainly, and grow into it, as opposed to buying a high-end GPU and not being able to utilize it fully. That would be general advice. As far as the last bit of this question, I don't know if they'll work well with the 1070, speaking specifically to the X34. The X34 is a crazy good monitor. I really like that monitor. I don't normally develop opinions like that for hardware because we kind of just go through it and review it and do objective analysis, but the X34 has grown on me and I do like that display. That said, it's also crazy expensive. It's like $1,200 the G-Sync, or it was anyway last I looked. It's good. I would not spend $1,200 on it. That's you're like a month of rent there. So yeah, the Predator is good. The 1070 will run games on the Predator. You'll have to drop your settings in some cases. Basically, if you want to interpolate our results, look at our 1440p benchmarking and look at our 4K benchmarking. 3440 by 1440 is right in between them, like halfway between. All you have to do is multiply the pixels, the width by height, and you get total pixel count, and then you can kind of interpolate the results based on that percentage. If you want hard numbers, one of my friends over at techgauge.com, Rob Williams, he ran tests on ultra-wides, and you can view his results, and I would encourage you to do so because he does work that I trust, and that is rare. So he has some hard numbers for you. The last question, whoever that guy is, says, so Steve, another Ask GN episode without cornrows. I would be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed, but that's neither here nor there right now. I am sure you are pretty skeptical when it comes to my comments, and I don't blame you, but I have a real question. All right, so we got a serious question. Considering the recent leaks of specs for NVIDIA's next Tesla card, the potential pricing and specs of AMD's Vega series in relation to Polaris, and the specs and pricing of the 1080, when do you... Next question. The next question was about hair products. Yo, welcome to my crib. Come on in. So we got all this stuff right here in the trash can. That's my L'Oreal, that's my Pantene. We got this up here, that's my boy. That's my favorite statue in this place. All right. So, top of thermal paste. This compressed air to dry out, you know, instead of a blow dryer. And then we got some of this anti-static matte cleaner deep down in the roots, you know what I'm talking about? That's how we get this right here. Hang on, I'll give you. So, that's the making of Gamers Nexus hair.